Welcome to Sunday Night Prime, and I'm delighted you're here with us, and we have an extremely interesting visitor tonight. However, before I get there, I have to have a few remarks, usually about the New York Times, because it's anti-Catholic. Well, I got some complaints, not from people who read the New York Times and agree with me, but around the country, people from Los Angeles, people from Washington, that newspapers in their cities are equally anti-Catholic. And I don't know whether it's the whole crowd, but I intend to really start making a lot of noise about the abuse of the media in this country against the Catholic Church. And it's quite disgraceful, and it's not part of what we expect here in the United States. And I'm planning on having a whole program on this subject coming up. So stick close to your newspaper, watch, and if some of them, send them back. Write them a letter and say, don't send me any more of your New York Times. They're too anti-Catholic. Now, this evening, or this afternoon, we're going to have an extremely interesting visitor, and we're going to be talking about adoption. An adoption, a way of saving the experience and even the life of a little baby, a little child. And this evening, I'm very grateful to recognize Damien Owens. Good to see you, Damien.
Thank you, Father.
And he's got a very, very interesting background. Just tell us, where do you live, Damien?
New Jersey. I'm in New Jersey, which
yes.
I know resonates with you.
Yes.
Caldwell in Jersey City.
And you live in Mendham.
I grew up with Mendham High School, grew up out in Chester, New Jersey, and now my family and I are down in the Jersey Shore, actually.
Where?
Down in Little Egg Harbor.
Oh, Little Egg Harbor, the very place.
So we have water and sun and beach and with all the kids.
And Damien, tell me, how about your family? How many in your family?
My wife Melanie and I have been married for 18 years, and we have 8 little darlings.
Look on the...
7 daughters.
Look at all that.
And a new little baby boy. So daughter number 7 and my son Nathan were both adopted, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But 8 little kitties that I get to come home to every day.
Now, why are they all carrying license plate?
Oh, it's a setup. This is what the personal has become the professional, has become the apostolate. So our introduction to adoption really just about 3.5 years ago, has become such a passion for us as a family that we're involved now. And I've taken a position as executive director of the Children First Foundation, which is dedicated to really supporting and encouraging adoption through crisis pregnancy centers in the tri-state area and in fact nationally.
Nationally. And Choose Life, that has been part of your work.
Absolutely.
You, along with, who else work on that? Getting Life on the, was that Elizabeth? Was she on that too?
Well, actually, the National Choose Life Play began as an effort down in Florida with a wonderful man named Russ Ammerling. And Russ, working in Florida, get the plate there, and it really just took fire from about the year 2000. So here we are 11 years later, and the 28th state, North Carolina, is just poised to become the next offering for his state license plate.
Isn't that wonderful?
It's a beautiful thing.
So you're a majority now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm proud to say New Jersey became the 26th state, really the majority state there, and we hope with the program and with the project to provide incredible funding for the crisis pregnancy centers to help to promote adoption. This is a great graphic.
Here is a very nice map showing us the states that have, the green states are the ones that have been openly, clearly defending life. Mm-hmm. And I understand a couple of those have moved since then into the green states. It's unfortunate those red states,
yes,
they are ones that have not supported.
Well, you know, the up and down with it is even organizations like the Children First Foundation, who explicitly are promoting adoption, not necessarily dealing head on with the abortion issue, but really promoting adoption. Still, choose life has become such a pejorative, or at least a phrase that just scares the heck out of legislators and others, that the phrase alone, which is really a key in what we do in choosing life, adoption, parenting, has become such a lightning rod for those who really do support abortion, even though that's not really the work that we're involved in. So they kind of take a backseat, but the majority of the states that do have looked at it, have used it, and it's become a great means of really evangelizing for the great gifts of life.
It's incredible to think that people would be opposed to adoption.
Yes.
I mean, I find that unthinkable.
Well, just a quick statistics. You look at, just in the world of crisis pregnancies, about 59% of young women choose to mother. Then you have the abortion rate at about 27%. And then about 14% will miscarry, but only 1% will choose adoption. And
is that a fact?
Only about 1%, and that's taken right out of Guttmacher Institute, right from the the abortion epicenter study. So I think there's a broader cultural misunderstanding or really just discomfort with adoption, and then in that crisis pregnancy moment, it becomes something that if it's not understood and known, made aware, and shown for its great positive aspect, becomes a non-thought. There was a great group that did a study with young women in crisis pregnancy, and I'll remember the name when I leave today, but they were interviewing, finally say, what is the thought process? And they found that women in crisis pregnancy really chose abortion as the best of three evils, right, in their minds, right? Adoption, parenting, and abortion, adoption, and parenting, where adoption actually was a third. I said it in the wrong order. So they look at these as their correct options. One of them obviously is a choice for death. The other two are really life choices. And our organization really is about promoting a deep and profound understanding of how adoption is such a life-giving option that we are choose lifers, those of us who understand what's at stake here. And there are two options that give life to the mother and to the child, and there's one that does not. So in terms of choices, which we are all about choices, we want to educate and really bring an awe and a wonder to this whole world of adoption that well before there's a crisis pregnancy, but certainly there as well, of how beautiful the gift is for that choice. And that's really what Melanie and my personal encounter with our first two adoptions here that brought us into a world that really put us back on our knees in awe.
After you had your own six,
yes,
you adopted two.
We did.
You may be unique in the United States.
Well, it's funny, I thought so. And yet, the more I speak about adoption in my own speaking ministry, the more people that come up afterwards. I meet more people just in the last few years sharing our adoption stories, that there is a strong contingent of people who do adopt, but the overall numbers are low, percentages are low. But there are such beautiful stories, Father, of both birth mothers and of adopted families, and how the whole encounter, however dramatic and sometimes stressful, it's beautiful. There's an awe there when there is this exchange of the education of a child, raise my child what I can't do. It's a tremendous act of love.
Your own work, your organization, you're executive director of the Children First Foundation, and this is you are the executive director of that. Were you the founder of it?
No, actually, the Children First Foundation was founded in 2001 by Dr. Elizabeth Rex and her husband Charles Rex in New Jersey.
They've been on our program.
Yes, wonderful people.
Of course, I should know that.
Well, I first was introduced to them years ago when I saw the Choose Life initiative in our New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area, and I was excited about it, and I knew they were battling to get that plate available. So I remember seeing the project and being very excited about it, but it would take another 10 years before we would connect again after New Jersey approved the Choose Life plate in November of 2010, just a few months ago. And in that initiative, I was giving a talk at Connecticut Right to Life on family and theology of the body, and at the time, as our second adoption with Nathan was fresh in my mind. So I remember telling the story about that, and Elizabeth was in the audience, and she introduced me to their organization. And it just seemed such a natural and beautiful fit there that I was thrilled when I was offered the position to help to promote this great cause in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut.
Now, you go out and speak around the country on the theology of the body and other issues on marriage, trying to save marriage as possibility.
Yes.
Sadly, tragically, here in New York State, we have just accepted legally same-sex marriage, quotes, end quotes.
Yes.
And it's a terrible mistake. My own personal conviction is that some homosexual people need their needs. They believe they need to live with another person. It's contrary to the divine law, but they do. But that's one thing. And they're quiet and go about their ways. They're New Yorkers. They don't make a lot of noise. New Yorkers don't tell everybody what their problems are. But all of a sudden, we have this other situation now of really using the name marriage, which is a sacrament in the Catholic Church. And I know the people, I've read some of their things, they want to feel completely accepted, but it's a serious problem. You and I cannot decide what marriage is. And we can't make up our own mind what it is the priesthood. We can't decide what is baptism. These are outside of our control. But unfortunately, this brings confusion into this situation.
You know, Father, one of the things that I've come to learn just in 16, 17 years of work around pro-life is how connected these issues really are. And there are so many issues that are related to what we know as Catholics in our philosophy and our theology of the formation of the human person. You know, what does it mean to be human, to become a man and a woman in the fullest sense of personhood? And that is a very delicate but profound natural and supernatural encounter, meaning, we're born literally of another person, but we don't become who we are in a vacuum. We don't come in isolation. No. We don't even know who we are outside of relation to other people, borrowing from Gaudium et Spes, right? But the family is not just some elevated, idealistic theology. There's a real human reality that we can't become who we are outside of those intimate relations with others. And marriage being that rock-solid foundation, and the family that naturally flows from that, is not just some cultural ideal. It turns out, as you know, it's a necessity for a civilization to continue. There have always been different kinds of family settings, different kinds of arrangements, relationships, sexual activity, all those things have always existed. But what has allowed those to exist and the culture to exist, without destroying it, is this solid core of marriage and family that flows from it. And I think we are at a pivot point where questions about adoption, which people look at a little sideways, are still exotic, unfortunately. Questions about abortion, about marriage itself, about living together, about all these things that are really connected, even though we're taught that they're separate. Contraception, in vitro fertilization, name them all. they're connected in the sense that each one of them plays a role in that formation of the person, which is where adoption is so beautiful, in that in those situations where, however the child is conceived, whatever the situation is, there is still an imperative and a right that that child draws to be raised by a mother and a father so that they can become who they are. And I think that awareness allows adoption really to take its prime place as an option that's been too long ignored.
We have a little break right now, but we'll be back. I have a very difficult question for you right now. So take a little break. Now, Damon, we've got a very interesting question here. Presently, in all different states, it is permitted for a child to be adopted by a same-sex couple, two people who present themselves in a perhaps called a marriage or single living together, and adopting a child. Now, I'm very uncomfortable with that because I'm not only a priest, but I'm a psychologist. Mm-hmm. And what is this communicating to the child as he grows up? Will they be confused about their own identity, sexual identity, and their understanding of relationship with other people, man or women? What is your own thought on this?
I'll offer my thought, because this is very related to the work that I do, and then sort of narrow it to what we're doing at the Children First Foundation more specifically. In the broader sense, there's two dynamics I think that are going on. One is an ideal that is not just a religious ideal in terms of the environment where a human person can really become who they're created to be, the family. More than just that ideal that may or may not use religious terms, we have a whole cultural history. We have a human history, an anthropology that really supports a mother and a father raising their children, preferably, ideally, the mother and the father whose union called into existence this new person. Now, again, the child draws rights to be known and loved by that mother and the father. Adoption is so beautiful because in the cases where that mother and father cannot, or that mother cannot provide what that child deserves, it's a beautiful act of love for the sake of the child to allow that child the environment that they have, again, a right to be known and loved by a mother and a father. The other dynamic in our current culture is not only a denigration of marriage itself, of this ideal almost being mocked, not almost, but in many cases actually being mocked, but so many growing alternative households, and I'm not trying to be politically correct. I mean, there's just all kinds of variations you couldn't even think of before, but there's a number of them that in all other areas and measurable areas, nice people are in.
Nice people?
Well, I meant they're nice people. They're not the people that have horns on their heads or they're spitting. They got nice jobs. They got suits. They're, keep their lawns nice and clean. They're good people and not otherwise objectionable. But by rejecting the ideal of a child having the right to be known by a mother and a father, the measure of a good home becomes subjective. There's no measure in terms of what does this child deserve. The measure now is, as an adult, what do I want? And that's the reality is we have an adult-centered view of both marriage and family, and therefore of children. So the situation of same-sex adoption in states, and the reality of it is really part of a larger, I think, milieu of a misunderstanding of what a child deserves, coupled with the fact that these children have immediate needs and can be in very bad situations. So the argument is it's better than where they are. It's better that they have someone to love. And it's hard to argue against that looking at the backdrop of our current culture. So the difficulty that we have in holding out this ideal of being loved by a mother and a father is challenged by the reality of these really bad situations that some of these children are in.
Well,
So,
start with one more difficult situation, but it seems to do very well where there is one parent. Perhaps one parent has died or left, and a mother raising her children alone, or rarely, but occasionally, a father raising a child or two. And remarkably, they can do a very good job.
they can, but I think you know as well that every sociological study that's been done has shown that children do significantly better by all measurable outcomes. As one social scientist said, if you can measure it, we have. And what we found is that nothing, barring race, barring class, income levels, nothing compares to the outcome of a child than first the father in the home, but more importantly, being raised by a mother and a father. That's sociological fact. That's not a religious dogma. It's not even a natural law argument yet. It's just a known fact. So the question becomes, in that environment where this child needs and deserves that, how do we provide that? And I think in that sense, there is a combination of a new group of people, whether they're same-sex couples or whether they're even singles now, who by deliberate decision are trying to raise children without a mother or father. Now, by circumstance, with a single mother, single father, that's a situation where it's heroic because they're trying to do something that's impossible. The mom is trying to be a mother and a father. It's not possible. She's doing it for the sake of the child. Beautiful thing, by circumstance. But this idea of doing it by choice takes on a whole nother moral order, where in many cases, I'm not sure if you're aware, there are agencies that are not only allowing same-sex adoption, they're actually placing them at a higher priority than other families. This is by their own admission. So we've got an ideological problem here that I think, in a practical sense, coming back to our organization, which we don't deal with directly, but coming back to our organization, by raising awareness and the number of couples, families, to adopt children, the numbers of those families available will solve that problem. So one of our missions with the Children First Foundation is placing the children's needs first. It's part of our name. And that Children First is asking, particularly Christians, to take the gospel seriously in terms of providing for orphans, providing for widows, and taking a role of saying, look, I've got this family, maybe, maybe not, but adoption shouldn't be exotic as we're standing and walking down the altar as a couple. It shouldn't be exotic 10, 20 years into our marriage as we're raising our children. Why wouldn't that be a norm in terms of opening the procreation and education of children, opening our home to assume that further education. I say this often in my marriage classes, we're strange creatures in the sense that we need 2 decades to mature, at best. Right? 20 some odd years, 24 years I think for the brain to fully mature, but certainly 2+ decades for a human person to become mature. And that 2 decades isn't passive, it's in dynamic relation with other people and coming to a full relationship with the God in whose image and likeness we're made. So those 20 years, taking that role and taking a young person and helping them to become who they are, theologically, sociologically, emotionally, is a beautiful encounter. But personally, as all of those, when Melanie and I first decided to adopt, and we went through this process, and it's basically an extended pregnancy. I mean, between the paperwork and all the, but when we get a chance to sit with this birth mother, one time in the hospital, she'd just given birth, and tears of joy, but also tears of handing her daughter to us, Olivia, to raise, and saying to us, I know you can raise her better than I can right now. I mean, I go back to that. That was an encounter that defies words and categories. It's this awesome sense that my motherhood is in providing the best for my child. It doesn't make me a bad person. In fact, as much as this hurts, I know my hurt is for her betterment. And the whole dynamic of that is something that is a blessing for the birth mother, the birth family, and to the adoptive family. And fast forward another year or so when my son Nathan came to us. Here's this college young girl, beautiful athlete, beautiful Nigerian young woman who found herself pregnant for reasons we don't really understand, don't know yet, but made a similar decision that of the pressure as a college student and the pressures on a college campus to be a star varsity athlete and to find yourself pregnant. It's just such a funny term, right? Like the British say, I fell pregnant, right? Found herself pregnant and had the courage not only to resist those the death choice, but then to do something that she, by her own admission, had never knew was possible, placing a child for adoption with another family, actively choosing the family that would raise her son, so that the 2 days after he was born, my son was actually born on my birthday, Father, born on my birthday, and he came into our house 2 days after, and 2 days old, and she just was heartbroken but hopeful that now her son would have life. This is the dynamic, that the power of the birth mother to know that her motherhood is one that's not necessarily her raising a child that she's not capable of raising. It's providing so that the child can have what he or she deserves. So in that sense, the question about where the child is placed can easily be overcome by, I believe, the success of our organization in raising the awareness, the attractiveness of adoption in these crisis pregnancies.
Now, here's a very interesting thing, and it's a problem. You now have, as our society is very confused, and it's hope that well-founded religious organizations, churches, in a general sense of that word, stand by the moral law. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they should encourage, and more than encourage, sanction, is the normal family. Suppose you run into the situation of two women living together. One of them has become artificially inseminated. Mm-hmm. And there are examples of this. Mm-hmm. And these are not people doing this out of wicked intention. They do not seem to see themselves in a normal heterosexual relationship. And so I saw an article here one place, Heather has two mommies. Yes. I remember where I read it. Now, the child grows up, and it well may be that the two homosexual parents are loving and concerned and maybe even religious. But how will that child do? I don't know, are there any statistics you've ever seen on that?
What we do know, you can say with certainty, is that we don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. And the question, really one of caution, would be, why are we headlong into a broadly accepted scenario that has no sense? We did this many times, but certainly back in the whole no-fault divorce fiasco from the 1970s. And the idea was, oh, it's actually better for the children, we'll get them out of this. They didn't know. And it took another 30, 40 years where now it's universally recognized that divorce harms children.
Yes.
Permanently.
Yes.
Now, there's overcoming, it's not like, but to say that it's neutral or good is not, but it took what? 40 years of experimentation to decide that. So I think we're in the same mentality, that because the adults want, and that they're not convinced that there's an urgent, like the earth, if the earth doesn't fall tomorrow because this happens, it must be okay. Right? So I think we're going to be in a scenario like that, where there's 30 or so years after that. You know, our work going back to the Children First Foundation really is prior to that drama, and dealing with the primary issue of good people who would be open to adoption, good families that could and would, if they knew more about these beautiful occasions and opportunities, would do that. And without getting into the politics, because we don't work directly with adoption agencies as a foundation, but we work with crisis pregnancy centers, maternity homes, who are firsthand, as you know, Good Counsel and our friend Chris Bell, firsthand helping these women to make life-affirming decisions, right? And in those life-affirming decisions, it's really, there's two choices, not just the one for mothering. Adoption is a beautiful option that we sincerely believe, if people understood more about and were more aware of the graces that come from it, would be a choice that they would accept. So our job really is to raise the tide for adoption. And in that sense, when you have what should be a majority of good Christian Catholic families or solid families with a mother and a father, then we can address that issue of the availability of children in a more deliberate and profound way. But to sit back and not be part of adoption, and then to be concerned about what's happening but not willing to do anything, I think is a little bit out of order.
Well, you mentioned good counsel, and I work with that too. And I must say that we have seen very beautiful experiences of adoption. It's a very, very positive experience along that line. Now we have another break, folks, so behave yourselves while we're chatting here, and we'll be back in 2 minutes. Well, we're on this evening, and we're looking again at all of these issues related to adoption and children finding in the right place. One of the issues was years ago that babies were found in airports, in the gas stations, at police stations.
People's doorsteps.
People's doorstep on the basket. And this is called the movement of safe haven. And believe it or not, there are 50 states and the District of Columbia have safe haven laws on which if a mother cannot handle a newborn baby, they must do that. Now, some of the examples where they would bring a child safely without question.
Each state has a designated, in fact, there's usually a sign, there's somewhere that designates a location as a safe haven, and literally meaning that, and we've seen these in the news, you just talked a little bit about these. In more recent times, it's been more, I don't want to say callous, I guess that's the word. There's been more brazen, I guess, in our age of abortion, where the mothers are, recently tossed a baby out of a window, driving her car, driving off into, I mean, there's all kind of terrible stories there. But at the core of it is a tragedy that could be avoided if they knew that in those situations, there's a place that they can bring their child, newborn or young child, it just doesn't really matter, a place where they can drop their child off where the child can be safe. Now again, this is best understood from the children's perspective, not from the adult perspective. From the adult perspective, we can lay all kind of, guilt trip on the mother and what's not, and some of it may be justified. But really, from a children first perspective, we need to save the lives of these children who are innocent victims, whether it's by abortion or whether it's by abandonment. So again, making the safe havens available in all 50 states. One of the pioneers or the men who's really worked this is Mr. Tim Jacquard, and his work with safe havens is pictured there with our president, founder, Dr. Elizabeth Rex. He was provided a national effort in getting these safe havens available.
On the picture there,
yes,
was Archbishop Migliore with the United Nations family, and that's Tim Jacquard on the other side from Elizabeth Rex.
So what we're connected.
I'm going to get him on here. I want to.
You should. The work he's done, and he'll have far more, insight into what these laws have been able to do in terms of saving babies' lives. But connected back to adoption now, again, having families interested, available, aware, excited, graced to adopt provides now a place where the children can receive what they justly do.
Now, of course, your audience is going to ask the question: how in the world can a mother of her own child abandon a child because you can't handle him and leave the child in some dangerous or inappropriate place? And here's an interesting thought. In the world of psychotherapy and psychiatry, there is a fair number of mentally ill people in society. Perhaps 3 or 4%. Most people don't think it's that high, but mentally ill people are not seen easily. They stay at home. They are not involved with other people. Nobody ever sees them. And they're struggling, sadly, with serious mental illness. They're not bad people, but deeply troubled people. Then there's another group of people called borderline people. They may be, and depending on where you are in the country, could be up to 10 or 15%. These are people on the edges of mental illness, and they may, at certain times, be much more confused than they would be at other times. And so you may get up to close to 20% of your population doing things that make no common sense at all. No decency, no common sense. And if you just look in this country, the immense, abominable pornography.
Yes.
Who in the world looks at this stuff? Disturbed people who become more disturbed. And in America, we have the big illusion that everybody's sane except, the old man down by the river. Oh, no.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
And so you have severely disturbed people conceive a child, maybe with no responsibility because they're not organized. They may be sexually abused, they may be raped, they may be who knows what. But they have this little child, and they are completely incapable of dealing with it. It should be the voice of responsibility of society and of religion to tell people that if they have a child that they can't handle, can do this, to bring the child to a safe place, to a police station, to a church, to public library, to some place where there are responsible people. Now, a great many people would not know what to do, but someone is what they call a gatekeeper. In sociology, they call gatekeepers. Clergy are gatekeepers. Police officers are. In rare situations, taxi cab drivers maybe, and it takes different people. But he's a taxi cab driver, has had to deal with someone falling apart in the taxi, or having a baby left in the car. And what do you do?
Well, I think probably a perfect question to get you guys to save that question for Tim Jacquard when you have him on. He may have more details. But I think that in fairness, clearly there would be some mental illness involved in that. But I think in fairness, the high levels of sexual activity, the high levels of pregnancy, and in many cases, the wrong-headed notion that I must take care of my child. I think that also plays probably a larger role in these women who think that they must or can raise their children and then realize after months or maybe a couple of years they can't. And statistics actually bears this out. A few numbers here: 52% of all mothers on welfare had their first child as a teen. Over 52% of all mothers on welfare had their first child as a teen. What's he say? Over 50% of children raised by a teen are referred to social service agencies.
Teenager.
Yes. Nearly 80% of teen mothers go on welfare within 5 years of the child's birth. These are all examples. The key one here, less than 8% of teen fathers remain to marry their children's mother. I would think the number one issue, not discounting any mental illness for some case, it's fatherlessness. That's a leading indicator of poverty in the U.S., was whether the child or without a father in the home. So the desperation, I think, can't be discounted with some of these young women who may be otherwise intelligent, maybe otherwise college educated, may otherwise come from good families, but the desperation of that situation is calling us to do what we can from the child's perspective, to do what we can to save that child's life, whether it's adoption straight, whether it's making these safe haven programs or places available to them. This is the call today of what it means to help the widows and the orphans. This is what it looks like today, whether it's a teen mother, whether it's a young adult mother, whether it's a crisis pregnancy, whether it's an abandonment, whether it's whatever the situation, the father who's left. We have an imperative as Christians, and our faith is really demanding that we step up certainly as families with mothers and fathers here, regardless of fertility, infertility number we have. We never thought, Melanie and I had talked about adopting early on before we were married and sort of fantasizing about it, but you know, we were having girl after girl after girl, and it wasn't until we hit 2 miscarriages in a row after our 6th daughter was born that we really started to remember our desire to adopt. And once we got into that, it's a world that has forever changed my pro-life work, forever.
Adoption.
Adoption. Oh, what a beautiful world.
All my life as a priest, I've been both at the Children's Village and with the work with Good Counsel Homes. I've been constantly aware of that, reminding myself theologically that we are all adopted children of God.
That's right.
And our divine Savior was the adopted son of St. Joseph.
Those realities, which to me were, I knew them, you know, before our adopting. They were part of my church talk and my Catholic lexicon and pile of stuff. It became enfleshed when I became an adopted father. When Olivia came into my life, Melanie in my life, when Nathan came in last year, that whole idea and reality, not idea, the reality of adoption as being adopted sons, of being here and a father, a loving father bringing you in not only to take and to care for you, but now to put you in line for the inheritance so that everything, you are now available, and I pour everything into you now and in the future that you didn't get on your own, that I take you in as a full member. And all the other analogies and examples we have in our faith of a grafting of a tree onto the root of Jesse, right? Where now, as Gentiles, not even those born in the Jewish line, we become spiritual Jews in the sense that we are part of that, adopted into the family and part of the Abrahamic covenant, right?
Yeah.
It's real.
It's a thought that many people listening to this program would not have thought of themselves spiritually adopted people.
Yes.
And they would also not be particularly familiar with adopted people, except if they should have relatives or friends who are adopted. And years ago, you know, it was a word that was said with a whisper.
Yes.
Oh, he's adopted.
Right.
Did you ever hear this?
Yes.
This stuff.
Yeah.
Now, people don't do that at all. And I must say, I'm one of the great movements in the right direction that we are realizing that adoption is part of life. And we are all adopted by the children of God.
And the grace, Father, the grace that Melanie and I have experienced, the grace that we are our best to pour onto to all of our children. At this point, they're all our children. It's not categories of of where they're from, but there is a grace of when you participate and open in that we never expected. Here we thought we were, offering something for, a child that didn't have a mother and a father, and lo and behold, they have added and blessed to our family in a way that we never could have realized.
Now I realize our audience must be very impressed by this presentation. I know this audience, and a great many of the people watching our program are devout people, mostly Catholics, but Protestants,
Sure.
Jewish people, Orthodox people, some Muslims. I get letters from a few Muslims in America here. And they're all sensitive, caring people. It's to see that and hear what you're telling us and your presentation. More than that, your whole life, you and your wife, with this. I'm hoping and praying that our audience is listening carefully.
Amen.
And I think you could tell us more about the adopted child. You know, how it must be for a little child growing up and then finding that they're adopted. Now, apparently, one of the ways that parents do this very nicely, that said, you know, we picked you out. we picked you. We went to the hospital. We picked you out. That's a nice way to say it, you know. And but I'm hoping and praying that more and more people will be recognizing this responsibility.
Yes. I had this conversation with Dr. Ray Guarendi, who you may know is a brilliant Catholic, very funny Catholic psychologist, adopted father of 10.
Adopted father of 10?
He's adopted 10, and just a beautiful man, great family. But he
What's
speaks
his
about
name,
this.
Doctor?
Ray Guarendi.
Guarendi.
And Dr. Ray.
Where is he located?
He actually, when you and I were speaking at the men's conference in Phoenix, he was also on the roster there speaking. So he speaks on family and parenting and fatherhood and
where is he located?
Where is Ray? He's in Ohio, I believe. He's outside of Cleveland, I believe. But in any event, I asked him this question because getting his own experience with that, and he is an adamant, and there's some in the psychology world, especially family and child psychology, some debates about real issues of blending families and things, and they're real. But every parent has issues with their children. But his point is that it's that encounter with our children that they are, whether they look like us or don't look like us, whatever their situation, we have to deal with their birth and their means of conception and whatever in terms of their formation. But it's really on the same level of the parenting that we do with all of our children, right? Each one of them, even conceived in our own families, have their own unique personality, temperaments, effects, whether they're in utero or, you know, postpartum or childhood. So there's always that formation of the person that in that sense is not very different, although the specific issues of adopted children do exist. I will say that our organization in promoting adoption is not naive about the challenges of both convincing mothers to adopt, put their children for adoption, or encouraging families to open their homes to adopt the children. But there's something that every one of your viewers and everyone here can do. If you are open to adoption, certainly reaching out to an adoption agency, preferably a Christian or Catholic one, and just going for an information night. Not like Melanie and I, just walk in and ask questions. There's no obligation. We saw one video at Bethany Christian Services here in New Jersey that just moved our hearts so much. Witness testimony from the birth moms themselves that answered so many questions. But even if you're not open for adoption, or maybe it's past your time, or it's not something that you could do right now, our organization with these Choose Life license plates is a brilliant and an effective way of helping to promote this cause. You're holding our brand new New Jersey sample plates here. People might have been following the drama of the Choose Life plates. They're in 28 states right now, the 28th state. And here the Children First Foundation is promoting these plates as a real substantive witness. We call them the traveling billboards in the cars for life, helping to encourage that. But also the funds from this go directly to promoting adoption at these.
Is that so?
And it's a tremendous amount of money. Right now I think there's been over $13 million that has, from these license plates around the country, that has gone to help adoption.
Isn't that wonderful? So
if you have a car, you can help in this brilliant way, certainly by contacting www.choose-life.org and find out where your state is with those.
Say it again.
It's www, the website, www.choose-life.org to find out where your state is and where you can find out about it. Children First Foundation here in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut provides these plates.
The little kids.
That's it, and they're beautiful. And our primary focus here is in providing necessary funding for crisis pregnancy centers to promote adoption. And if you're, in our case, $25 a year subscription, and your plates here does tremendous work. Our goal is to get 50,000 plates just in New Jersey alone to raise over $1 million each and every year for centers like Good Counsel and the other crisis pregnancy centers in the state.
One last issue here we have just a couple of minutes. The safe haven.
Yes.
Where a mother can come and bring a baby or abandon the baby, put him in a little basket and leave him there when ring the doorbell.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the safe haven laws, as I mentioned,
mm-hmm.
in 50 states. Tim Jacquard
yes.
is the founder of this,
mm-hmm.
and I think we're going to have him in our program, and it's very worthwhile. I want to thank you so very much. This was
a pleasure to see
wonderful,
you. Thank you.
Wonderful evening. May Almighty God bless each of you, and may the Lord watch over you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. And do know that EWTN constantly supports new causes, and I'm so pleased that I have my opportunity with EWTN to make known of people listening in of what's part of Christian life, Catholic life in the United States. And we're not just getting people out to church on Sunday morning. We're not getting people to do various things that are perfectly good things. We are responsible for being part of the whole Christian life, following what Christ tells us. I was hungry and you gave me to eat. I was lonely and you gave me to drink. This is an important thing, and we need to remember that this is our Christian responsibility. So week after week, I'll be hoping these messages to you. God bless and have a good week.